Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel M Stuart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous beach landscape. I'm going to teach you easy ways how to mix and create a realistic tone, so you can paint an ocean, you can create waves. I'm going to teach you how to do things such as the beach and sea foam, and I'm also going to teach you how to paint a realistic palm tree. I'm going to show you just techniques using simple easy brushes just so you can create a really realistic palm tree, so you can create this gorgeous acrylic beach scene at home. So let's get into it. So the colours for today's painting tutorial that you're going to need are white, yellow, green, purple, cobalt blue, phthalo blue, brown and black. Now if you don't have cobalt blue and phthalo blue, don't worry, we can make them later. So we've got a 9 by 12 inch canvas here, and all I've done is painted burnt sienna. We're going to have some sea, we're going to have some foam, we're going to have some wet sand, and we're going to have a sandy beach, and we're going to have some mountains off in the distance that are going to get lighter as they fade away into the horizon, and we're going to have a nice palm tree here. So if you want to pause the video, you can just pause it and get the outline while I just jot down some blue just to create a rough outline, and away we go. Now I'm not going to fill in the tree just yet because I'm debating how big I want the tree and where I want to put it. So it's just a rough outline. That's the great thing with chalk, you can debate and you can move things around and it doesn't leave any marks. So first thing we're going to do is block in the sky. So we're going to take some blue, lots and lots and lots of white and a dab of black, and you should create this lovely sort of pastel tone. Now again, just like usual, if you get a big brush and we just try to block it in, so blue, lots and lots and lots of white and a dot of black, and you should get this tone that I've got pre-mixed. Now again, don't worry if you've got lots of the underpainting shining through that burnt sienna, that's to be expected. We'll probably have to give 2 coats because it's such a pastel tone. But what we want to do is we want to paint the wash, which the bit that comes up on the sand, the same colour, because that's going to reflect the same light as our sky. So we're going to try to do a mirror. So look, if you dry it and you just have to do a second coat just so your sky looks more blue and doesn't have any horrible streaks or marks in it, that's totally to be expected with acrylic paints. Acrylic paints, because they're watery, they can dry quite streaky, so if you have to give it 2 coats, don't worry. But if you can just block it in with a big brush and just do exactly the same with the same colour for the wash, the wet sand that shimmers on our beach. So when you're happy with it and you've got rid of all your streaks and it's nice, if you just get some blue and we just block back in our mountains just so we know roughly where they're going to be. Now what I wanted to do is I've been trying to teach you all about distance. So I've been trying to come up with just scenes out of my mind to help you, just sort of teach you how to create distance and far away objects and how to create realistic tones. So I thought, why not do 3 mountains just to teach that? You don't have to, you could just do one all the same colour, but I think it's quite a good way just to teach you how to have things far off into the distance and have some that are closer and just the different tones. So we've got 3 different ones and we're going to do 3 different shades of blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the nearest one first being the darkest. So we're going to get some cobalt blue and we're going to get some black. We're going to mix those 2 together, create a really dark tone, and we're just going to put that nearest mountain to us as the darkest. So good rule of thumb, whatever's nearer to you is always dark, and whatever is far off into the distance is always a lighter tone. And being that our sky is blue, that would mean that the things in the foreground would be a darker shade of blue, and the things off in the far distance, so that third mountain in the far distance, would be a lighter shade of blue. So it's an easy rule of thumb to teach you all. So I'm going to get some cobalt blue and I'm just going to fill in the middle one. And what we can do is we can adjust that tone in a minute. But all I'm going to do is just fill it in with some cobalt blue, just so I know roughly the middle tone. So again, that's going to be lighter than the first one. And then the third mountain is going to be super far away, so we want it to be very light. So we're going to get some cobalt blue and lots of white, and then just a smidge of black just to desaturize it. And we should get this lovely sort of pastel darkish blue. So it's a lovely colour. And if we block in this far away mountain, what it should do is create the illusion that it's far off into the distance. So all I'm doing, I'm just using a small brush and I'm just blocking in sort of mountain shapes. I'm just creating little ridges. Don't worry if your waterline is not flat. We're going to use some tape later and we'll make it all straight, so don't worry. We just want to get the tones right first off. So I'm really happy with the far away mountain. That looks perfect. And the nearest mountain is pretty good. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to mix some of that dark bluey black. We're just going to block that in just a little shade darker, so a tiny bit more black, just to make it a bit darker because it's the nearest one. So there we go. So we've got that all blocked in. It's looking pretty. Yay! And I think the middle one is just a bit too blue, so I'm going to get some cobalt blue and a little bit of black and a tiny bit of white. I'm just going to make a darker tone than for the middle, so that's a bit better. It's a bit, because it's got a bit of black in it. What black does, it just neutralizes it, just takes a bit of the color out. So if you have something like a really bright blue, by just using a tiny bit of black, it just sucks some of the colour out and it just makes it desaturated, and it gives that lovely tone where you get mountains and things off in the far distance. If you're ever painting anything in the far distance, get this lovely realistic tone. Look at that, it's fantastic. So now we've got 3 clear mountains and they all look pretty realistic just thanks to the tone. No detail, just to do with the realistic colour tone. So when you're happy with your mountains, please dry your painting so you don't put any tape on a wet painting. And we're just going to put a measured piece of painting tape on a straight line. So if you just measure about halfway down your canvas, and we're going to use these exact tones just while we've got them, just to go right down to the tape and just neaten all our water line. So all we're doing is we're just taking the exact 3 tones that we had of those mountains, and all we're doing is coming down onto our ocean. So again, just take the same 3 tones and just try to cover up some of that burnt sienna. See, this is one of the reasons I always paint my canvas in burnt sienna. If you had a white canvas, sometimes not till you're finished you realise you've missed bits. And when you've missed bits, what's really annoying is if you can't match the tone. I've had it before where I've seen bits on my painting that I've missed. It's a little bit of white and I cannot for the life of me match the tone, and I have to repaint an area in a completely different tone just to fill in a gap. So when you're happy with it, please take off the tape and then please dry it again, and we're going to put the tape right over the bit that we've just painted, so that's why we insist that you dry it. Create a straight line with your tape, and we're going to paint downwards now to create the ocean. So we're going to create this ocean that comes towards the beach. So how are we going to do that? We're going to create realistic deep water. So we're going to get some phthalo blue and we're going to add some yellow. So just blue and yellow will do the trick, but phthalo blue is very nice and it just gives a really nice realistic tone. And we're going to add a dab of purple to it, and this is going to be the darkest, deepest water. So this is the water that's far off into the distance. So again, just like our sky, we probably have to do 2 coats of this, but we're just going to try to block it in, and we're trying to, just like the mountains in the far distance, we're going to start off very dark and we're going to get lighter as we come towards the beach. So again, if you just think that the water is very deep, so we want to get lighter, so I'm just going to add a little bit more blue and yellow to create this lovely sort of really dark turquoise, and some purple. So it's really deep water. And I'm going to create a second tone. So I'm going to get yellow and blue and a little bit of white and just make a lighter version. But it's got more yellow than it has blue now. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to block it in. So as you can see there, it's a really nice bright turquoise colour. And all we're doing, we're just coming up and we're going to just try to blend these two tones together and cover up as much burnt sienna as we can. So as I say, we're getting lighter because the water is getting shallower. So if you imagine the water is really, really deep out into the distance, and as it gets shallower, it gets more yellow because it gets mixed with the sand. So what we want to do is create the illusion of that. So I'm going to take some of the sky tone, which was a blue with lots and lots and lots of white and a dab of black, and I'm just going to take the same colour as we just had previously, so a little bit of yellow and blue, and I'm just going to create the really shallow water. So it's still a little bit turquoise, it's not the same as our sky, but it's very, very light in tone. It's a very pastel tone. And again, we're going to blend it into the previous tone and try to create a seamless transition. So this is all the shallowest water. So this is the water that comes right up to your ankles. As the wave retracts back, you get this lovely mix between the water and the sand, and you get this really, really lovely light turquoise colour mixed in with all the sand. So what we're going to do, we're just going to take the previous tone that we had, and we're just going to blend the two tones together. So there's not so much of a harsh transition between them. Now again, this is just like most acrylics, it's always going to look pretty scruffy when you block things in. So you can dry it and you can give it a second coat. So just by taking the exact same colours, so it was blue and yellow, tiny bit of purple, just to create the deepest water. So this is all the water that's going to be right up to the tape. This is going to be the water up to a horizon. So if you imagine these are where things like the boats are out into the distance, this is the really deep water, and as you come towards the beach, as you come towards the shore, you want to get lighter. So we're going to mix the second tone, so that was yellow, some phthalo blue, a little bit of purple, and some white. So a lighter, more yellowy tone, just a little bit more blue. So we should have a lighter turquoise as we come towards the shore. So if you try to block in sort of the middle of the ocean, that sort of tone, that's sort of the mid depths, and if we go back to the previous tone and just sort of gently merge the two together while it's wet. So what we want to do is keep that really dark tone at the horizon, because that's the deepest water. But we just want to gently merge the two tones together, just so you have nice seamless transitions. We'll add all the detail over the top, but just like all the other tutorials, if you have these nice seamless transition on your underpainting, it tricks the eye. So for the third one, it's just white. Oops, I've got a dirty brush. So it's white, yellow, a tiny bit of blue, get this really yellowy blue, bright turquoise mixture of the sand and the water coming together. So again, just gently try to blend it into the previous tone. Hopefully with the tutorials you're learning how to blend, how to create these sort of nice underpaintings that you can work on and then add the detail over the top. So I'm going to go to the middle tone, and I'm just going to gently, while I've got the same colours on my brush, I'm just going to try to blend them together just so the three tones seamlessly go into one another and you don't notice so much the transitions. Yay! Easy peasy! So now we've got a fantastic ocean starting to come together. I'm going to take some of the sky colour, so it was blue and a lots and lots and lots of white and a tiny bit of black, and I'm just going to add it to our lightest tone where it came up against the sand, and I'm just going to merge just this area here, just where it comes in. So it's just a mixture, so it's not too much of a jump between the greeny ocean, the turquoise ocean, and that wet sand. So I'm just going to mix the two colours together. And again, look, as I say, we can rework areas, we can go back, but it's just to block everything in, just so you've got a nice sort of easy sort of way to create an ocean in the future. So when you're all blended and you're happy with all your blending and you think it looks nice and the transition looks nice and everything looks nice and soft, there's not any colours that just really jump out, and you're happy with it, then remove your tape, and we should, if I can get the tape off, we should have a really lovely straight horizon for our ocean. If you've got any white bits like here where the paint's come off, we can touch that up later, so don't worry. Sometimes when the paint comes off, it just the tape, sorry, it just takes a bit of the paint off. So we're going to take some titanium white. So we're going to take some bright white, and we're going to just create a sort of edge of where our wave is coming up onto the wet sand of our beach. So all I'm doing, I'm taking a fine liner and I'm just trying to create the illusion of a wave that's coming up against the shore. So if you imagine the ocean, when it comes up against the shore, it sort of peels back and it leaves all this sort of bright wet sand, and that's the same colour as your sky normally. And it has this lovely sort of carpet look where it has sort of an end and it has all this sort of foam in it. So if you imagine sort of the bubbles of a bubble bath. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to create sort of like the look of waves. So all I'm doing, I'm just using titanium white, and I'm just going to put in where we had that cobalt blue earlier, just where I want things to be. So maybe let's have some waves coming down, and all I'm doing, if you imagine a diagonal line, I'm just going diagonally across towards the left hand side of the painting, and I'm just trying to kind of match the same angle as the previous one. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating sort of the illusion of waves coming into the shore. So I'm happy with the composition, I'm liking the composition, it's starting to look cool, and I'm happy with the colours, I'm liking these neutral tones, these realistic tones. So we're going to get some cobalt blue, and we're going to take some of that sky tone, I'm going to create it just a bit darker, so this lovely sort of darker tone than the sky, and we're going to add a little bit of the phthalo blue and some yellow. We're going to mix, let's put a bit more blue in. We should get this really nice tone, a little bit of black. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some waves. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a flat brush and I'm just going to create the illusion of waves. So this is sort of the sunlight hitting the ocean and just creating sort of the illusion of light, sort of making the crests of the waves. So if you use a flat brush, which is just a flat-headed brush, it's really easy to do straight lines. So all I'm doing, I'm going right up to the horizon and I'm just leaving gaps in the underpainting. So I want some of that underpainting tone, that nice transition, and all I'm doing, I'm just using this lovely blue tone to create the illusion of the light hitting the water and creating the illusion of waves, and it should make it look a bit more 3D. Now while I've got that colour, I'm just going to edge, just when a wave comes up, the edge is a bit darker than the wash. So all I'm doing, I'm going to use that tone just as a shadow tone. So I'll just go right up to the horizon, just creating the lines in the far distance, just to trick the eye. Yay! And it's very similar to that faraway mountain. So you know what? Where we've ripped off the tape, I'm just going to just block that back in. No one would ever know. So I'm just going to make that into look a bit neater. That's perfect. Great. Okay, so I'm going to take some white and I'm going to add it to the mix. And I'm just going to use a lighter version of the same tone. And I'm just going to go underneath where I've put the white, just to create sort of a shadow. And this is just sort of the shadow, just so I know roughly where everything is. So where you've got that lovely sort of wave retracting onto the wet sand, it creates a shadow, because obviously it's coming over the sand and you have this nice shadow. And I'm just going to do the same under any bit I've just done white. So all I'm doing is just using that tone while I've got it, and obviously we'll put the white back in a minute. So that's looking cool. Okay, so we're going to take some yellow and some purple, and we're going to start doing the beach. So we're going to mix yellow and purple together. So a little bit of white. We should get this really sort of nice sort of tanny colour. Because it's got purple in it, it still looks a bit wet, it still looks a bit bluish. And this is going to be all the sand that is damp. So again, where you have all that glimmering wet sand, you also have an area of sand, sort of like a ridge, where it's all damp, where the water's come across it. So all we're going to do is we're going to block that in. So just using a big brush, we're just going to block all that area in. And last but not least, we're just going to do the actual beach itself. So we're going to get white and yellow to create a really, really bright sort of beach sand. So if you imagine somewhere like a tropical beach, like Antigua or somewhere like that, Barbados, has this gorgeous sort of whitish sand. And all we're going to do is just cover up that burnt sienna and literally just block in the final corner of our painting. So if you haven't subscribed already, please like and subscribe to the channel, and please put the bell notification on. It just alerts you when we have a new tutorial. We should have a new tutorial now every week, so I'm hopefully trying to put one on every weekend for you guys. So please put the bell notification and you won't miss out on any new videos from us. So we've got this lovely neutral tone, and we've got our wet sand. I'm just mixing up now. Just mixing up that same colour. I think my brush had a bit too much water on it, and I think because the paint is wet, sometimes with acrylics, as I said previously, sometimes rather than going back and forth and the colours don't stand out and they just merge into one another, sometimes it's easier just to dry the painting and go over the top, and that can make an area much darker or much lighter, just because by adding a second layer of acrylic paint, it just makes an area look more reworked, to tell you the truth. Especially with white, if you're adding things like white over the top for highlights, sometimes it's best just to dry it and just give it another layer, just because the white, what it will do is it will pick up the tone underneath. So look, all I've done is I've just dried it, and I'm going to get the exact same tones that we just mixed, which was purple and yellow, and I'm just going to go over the top. And just like our sky, look, you can see it clearly now. It just makes an area just look so much more dark and reworked just by going over the top. Acrylics are really forgiving. They're really, really easy. So if you make a mistake, they're brilliant to learn with, because you can let's create some footprints, why not? So they're great to learn with, because if you make a mistake, you can just dry it really quickly with a hairdryer and just completely just paint over it and fix a mistake. So compared to oil paints, they are much more forgiving. The problem is with acrylics, they do dry a bit flat and they will never look as realistic as oils. So I tend to use the both, but being that this is a beginner's tutorial and this is an acrylic tutorial, it's very, very good to start with acrylics, as I say, and work your way up to oils. So I'm going to use some titanium white, and I'm just going to rework the areas just to create the illusion of a wave. So where the wave is all splashing up against to the beach, I'm just using a flat brush and I'm loading it up with lots and lots of paint, and I'm just splatting it basically in a line to create the illusion of sea foam when you get a wave sort of coming up against the shore. So just tip your flat brush sideways, just load up lots and lots of paint and just make splats. So just think of all the sort of crests of the wave, sort of creating that sort of lovely sort of sea froth, and just go along where you've got that outline, just create the illusion of splats just to create this lovely ocean wave that's creeping up towards the beach. So it's super easy. This is just a complete image I just made out of my imagination. It's not a real place, I just thought I would create it out of my imagination. But because I paint seascapes so often nowadays, I can just think of something and I can just make it. So this could be Murrayland. The island of Murray. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just doing the exact same technique, just a little bit smaller. Just with the white, just trying to create the illusion of that lovely foam coming towards the beach. I think I've gone a bit loopy in the lockdown. I think I really need a holiday. I think I need to get out, I need to take photographs and get on the beach. Oh, I can't wait. I'm sure everyone is in the same boat. So we're going to create the sea foam now. So I'm just going to outline this far edge. So if you imagine this bit that comes towards the shore, when it hits the beach, it just creates a lovely sort of prominent edge. So by just using a thin brush and just lots and lots of white, just go around it. And as I say, if you have to do a few layers of white, that's quite normal. But what we're going to do with the very thin brush, we're going to create zigzags. And this is all the sort of sea foam where you get bubbles and bits of wash that all comes up with the wave. So we want to make it sort of look realistic. So what we're going to do is just create zigzags. So in the previous tutorial we did of the sunset, we did the exact same technique, but obviously with sunset tones. So if you learn this technique and just apply it with different tones, I'll put the sunset video thumbnail on the screen now so you can all check it out. And all we're doing is we're just creating little zigzags and splots, so it just looks more realistic. So all these little techniques, as I say, we don't want to make the tutorial too hard, but if you learn all these techniques and just add in little bits of detail, it'll just give your work a lot more realism and a lot more depth to it. So all we're doing is we're just trying to create these little zigzags that come up and join onto our nice white border, and that should create the illusion of realistic seawater. So realistic ocean. Because the tones underneath it, so if you think, because we've done that lovely transition between the deep water and the shallow water, by adding all these little white sort of vein sort of shaped zigzags over the top, what it does, it just tricks your eye. But it's the transition underneath it that is working, that is making it look more realistic. So again, if you work on your blending and you get your blending really, really good with the tones, and then if you add all this detail over the top, like all this sort of little zigzags, it should trick the viewer's eyes and make your work look more realistic. So as I say, it's all from my imagination, and you can just think where you want things to be. So if your water's too flat, you can always add more waves. But it's just trying to build it up, and sometimes it works and sometimes you have to rejig things about. And as I say, with the acrylics, it's great because you can just paint over areas. So why not make this area into more waves? This could be where the water's really hitting one another, and that could have a little wave coming up there. And what we're going to do, I'm going to create some off into the far distance. So these are some of the big mummers that are coming in the deeper water, and you get the sort of little crests, you get sort of little bits of foam bubbling up as they start to take shape as they come towards the shore. And again, look, it just adds a little extra layer of detail and a little extra layer of realism. So as I say, just putting these little extra touches. They're not hard, but it just gives your work a bit more depth. So we're going to take some of that really light sand colour, so yellow, phthalo blue, lots of white, and I'm just going to add a little bit more. I don't like this area of my beach, so I'm just going to add a little. That's what I was saying about acrylics. Look, I didn't like an area, so what I'm going to do is just put some of the underpainting colour first, and then I'm just going to get some white. Actually, sorry, I'm getting the shadow colour next. And then just going to get some white. And I'm just going to make the ridge more prominent. So as I was saying, you can just correct things. So if you don't like your wave, if your wave is a bit wonky, or you want to make it bigger at a certain area, you can just add a little bit more tones. And you can rub things out and add bits. That's the great thing about the acrylic paints. They're so easy to use. They're perfect for beginners. So all I'm doing, I'm just making my wave look like it's splitting there in the middle. Just going to come around, just make that edge just look much more wave-like. So it's just going over bits. As I say, sometimes your white will dry and it will absorb the blue or whatever colours underneath, and it won't look pure white. So when it's dry, just go over it. Just to make your areas just look more prominent, look more that they pop in, that they stand out more. So just by outlining it with the white, we can make it just look a bit nicer. So I'm just going to create some more wash and waves up here. So that could be a wave that's sort of really hitting each other. Just trying to think where you would have things. And there's no right or wrong way, as I say. You can just fiddle with it, and if you don't like it, you can just paint over areas. So all I'm doing is just taking a fine liner, and I'm just going to do the opposite side, just the area that I missed with some sea foam. And I'm pretty happy with the water. I think it's just a bit too harsh on this one side, so I'm just going to get some of that sky tone and a big brush, and I'm just going to make it a little less harsh on the eyes in that corner. Just blend it. Now I'm just going to get some white, and I'm just going to go around the edge where the wet sand hits the sand. I still don't like the beach and the wet sand. I think it looks a bit wonky, but we'll try and fix it. So I'm just putting a bit of detail on it first, sort of feel my way out. As I say, sometimes when you paint from your imagination, things can look a bit wonky. The thing with nature, everything's in absolute perfect how do you put it, definition. Like it's always in perfect proportion. That's the word I was looking for, proportion. Whereas when you try to paint from your eye, sometimes you can go a bit wonky. So all I'm doing here, I'm just tipping my brush diagonally, and I'm just using some white to create this sort of sheen effect on the wet sand. Yeah, and sometimes when you paint from your imagination, it's just not as good as nature. So sometimes your compositions can look a bit wonky. So again, with acrylics, you can just paint over it. It's no bother. But what we're going to do, we're going to try to just create a bit of a shadow tone. So I'm just using the same tone as we did for the far away mountain. and for some reason it's not really showing up. But I'm just using it, I think because the paint's white, it's all merging together. Oh, the paint's wet, sorry. So sometimes when I talk a bit funny, I get words confused. So look, some blue, some black, and some white. So blue, black, and white, and a tiny bit of purple. And we're gonna just create a shadow tone. So I'm just gonna outline it with that flat brush. So I'm just gonna go around. Just create a lovely, nice shadow. So there we go. And I'm just going to go around the area that we painted in. I'm just going to make it look a bit more realistic using that shadow tone. And again, just like how we did with the white, I'm just going to tip my brush diagonally. And I'm just going to create the shadows first. Now they're going to seem a bit harsh at first, but we're going to paint over it. But again, it just leaves a little bit of added detail. So don't worry if they look a bit harsh at first. We're going to paint over it. These are just sort of some of the fine detail that we're going to cover up in a minute. So because it looks a bit harsh, what we're going to do is first we're just going to go the opposite direction. So we're going to go the opposite diagonal. And we're just going to gently rub that into the wet paint. And we should have nice little lines. And I'm just going to merge the two and just try to soften it up with my big brush. Still looks a bit harsh. So I'm going to get some of the sky tone. And I'm just going to gently go over the top and leave some of it poking out, so you've got a hint of definition, but it's not too harsh. We don't want it being overbearing. So all I'm doing, I'm just using the sky tone just to soften it up, but I'm still leaving the hint of some of that detail. Now I don't like the wash, so I'm just going to get some white. I'm just going to go over the top again. I think it's a bit wonky. I think that's what's bothering me. Sometimes when you see things, you take a step back, it just doesn't work to your eye. And I think what we're going to do is I'm going to put some more waves in. So we're going to just go over the top with the flat brush, just with a little bit lighter shade of blue. So that mix we made up earlier, all I did was just add a tiny bit of white to it. And I'm just trying again, just create the caps of waves. So if you imagine the faraway mountain colour, all I've done is added a tiny bit of white to it. I'm just trying to put some really subtle lines in the far distance. Now I'm going to take some purple and yellow, and I'm going to make the sand wet tone, because I think what's bothering me is this bit. So I'm going to make the beach a bit bigger. So it's yellow, purple, and a tiny bit of white, not much white. And I'm going to make this more at the same angle. I think that's what it is. I think the proportion was just out of whack. So I'm just going to make it the same angle as these waves. So if you imagine like a diagonal, I'm trying to make it all the same sort of level for your eye, so your eye doesn't get annoyed. And while I've got that, I'm just going to create the illusion of sort of dents and rivets in the sand where people have been walking past. And I'm just going to darken off that corner. Now, please dry your painting when you're happy with all your bits and bobs. And we're going to take some black and some brown and we're going to paint in the tree. Now, the reason I'm saying to dry your painting is because if you make a mistake, you can always use a baby wipe and rub it out. So I'm going to take a flat brush and I'm going to create a big diagonal line with that really dark black and brown shadow colour. And we're going to create the tree trunk. So this is going to be our palm tree's tree trunk. Now you'll see in a minute why I'm saying to keep your painting dry, because that dark tone is really dark, and if you still have a wet painting, if you get any of it anywhere, you really will get annoyed because you won't be able to paint over it. You'll have to let it dry and you'll have to fix it, and sometimes it can merge and make a horrible yucky mark because it's such a dark tone. So I did this because I'll show you in 2 seconds where the base of my hand is going in the paint. As I'm going up here, it's going to smear in a minute. Just wait for it. Dun 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 dun. As I was blocking it in, I smeared the paint onto my sky. So look, there's a big brown patch right in the middle of my sky there. So all you do, because that painting is nice and dry because it was on the edge of my hand, just take a baby wipe and I just rub it out. So thanks the fact that that sky was dry, and if you've created any rough edges, you can just use a baby wipe, look, and just rub it out. Whereas if it's wet, unfortunately you're going to wait till it's dry and you've got to correct it, and sometimes you're going to have this horrible big black spludge. So we're going to do the leaves now, and all we're going to do is we're going to take a big line. So that's going to be one big line, and we're going to get our flat brush and we're going to come out from it diagonally. So watch, if we come out diagonally and create a line, a line, a line, and we're just going to come down and create a line. So think of a comb. We're just going to create long lines with that flat brush coming down from it. So see how easy it works? And we're going to go the opposite direction, go the opposite diagonal. So if you imagine going opposite diagonally away from that straight line in the middle. So whatever direction that line is, we're going to go diagonally away from it. There we go. Easy peasy. So we're going to draw a straight line. So straight line, come down. We're going to go diagonally away from it in one direction. So there we go. And then we're going to go diagonally in the opposite direction. So think of a mirror. There we go. So draw the straight line first with the flat brush and go diagonally away from it in one direction. And then think of a mirror, go diagonally away in the other direction. And you will create the illusion of palm leaves. It's so easy. So look, just come down with the straight line and go diagonally one direction and mirror it and go diagonally in the opposite direction once I get some paint. So look, there we go. Move my hand and we should have this fantastic illusion of palm leaves. So we're going to do the trunk now. So we're going to take some yellow and purple and we're going to create a lovely tone for the bark of the trunk. So we've got yellow and purple, so the same tone as we had for our wet sand. And we're going to outline our tree trunk and create all these sort of knocks. So if you imagine, if you want to outline it, so go right up to the outline of it and just create little knocks. So little horizontal lines going across the bark. So look, create an outline first and then just have these little diagonal lines coming off it. Now because you've got that lovely shadow tone first, what it should do is create the illusion of the bark. So we're going to outline it, so come up and then we're just going to go like this and create these little knocks. And it should create the illusion of the bark. Now we're going to add more purple to the mix, and the reason we're adding more purple is as it gets more towards the top it's going to just get a bit cooler because there's more things going on towards the top, like all the palm leaves, so you're going to get more shadow. Now we're going to take some of the dark shadow tone that we created earlier, so brown and cobalt blue. So we're going to get some brown and cobalt blue and lots of white. I think I've run out of white, so let's splat some white on there. So some white, blue and brown, and we're going to create a much cooler shadow tone, so let's add a lot more brown to it. So we should have this mucky sort of blue, and we're going to do the middle part of the tree, so that's the bit that's getting some sunlight but not very much, and it's going to be a cooler tone. And we're going to make sure we leave the knocks, so we're going to make sure we leave that shadow tone, that really dark tone, and all we're going to do is just create the illusion of bark. So look, there we go. Look how fantastic that looks. Wow. And again, with all these neutral tones, it's really looking realistic. So we're going to load up some sap green on our flat brush, and we're just going to go over some of the lines that we just did, just to give the illusion of the colour of the palm leaves being that lovely sort of really nice green, that tropical palm leaf tree. So it's exactly the same technique, just try to fill in areas, use the flat brush. Flat brushes are excellent for the palm leaves. And the great thing about when you have these tropical beaches, they have these gorgeous trees, and if you know how to do the leaves and you know how to do the bark, it is super easy by just using a flat brush. So all I'm doing is I'm just creating just green leaves. I'm just going over some of the ones that were the dark shadow tone, just to give them a hint of colour, just so they look more realistic and they look more like a real tree, really. So it's really easy. And what that lovely tree does is it just frames our painting. It just, again, it's just another added detail, and it just makes the scene look more realistic, creates a beach that I would like to visit. So we're going to get some black and some brown, just a really dark tone, and I'm just going to go over the right hand edge, and I'm just going to create some more knocks and just make that edge just really super stand out, just using that really dark shadow tone, just a little bit more added detail, just some more extra knocks on my bark. So there we go, easy peasy, and that looks fantastic. So I'm going to get some purple and some blue and a little bit of brown, just a tiny bit of brown, just make a tiny bit of black, just make a really dark shadow tone. And I'm going to load up my thin brush, and all I'm going to do is under all the white where we've had these little bits of waves, I'm going to create a really dark shadow tone. So if you imagine this is coming up towards our beach, the shadow is going to be quite harsh as it's quite near to the viewer, but it's still got some blue and purple in it. It's not as harsh as that tree because it's not as close to the viewer. So what we're going to do is just use that tone just to outline our waves here, and it just to give our waves, just to make them less flat. As I say, the thing with acrylics, they dry a bit flat. So what we want to do is just use a darker tone and a really thin brush just to emphasize some shadow. So this is the area which is not getting any light as that wave comes towards the shore. And again, it's just an easy technique. It's just using a darker tone just to outline the waves. So just take your time, just go around them. So it's all starting to come together now. So just putting all these little fine details towards the end is just the difference, just making your painting just look a little bit more realistic. The great thing with all these tutorials, I think you can paint these scenes in like about an hour. It's just really cool. You know, you can spend one afternoon and have a really lovely painting that could be a real super thing to cheer someone up, nice gift for someone. So I always say to people, painting's a really nice thing to do for other people. So if you've got anyone in your life who's having a hard time with the lockdown, with the situation as it is at the moment, maybe do a painting. The great thing about painting, you can get lost in it. So for your mental health, one of the reasons I paint so much is because what it does is it makes you focus on the now. It gives you something you can be proud of. So when you finish, you've accomplished something. You can be proud of it. And it just basically, because you're staying in the now and you're not worrying about things outside of it, you're only controlling what you are doing right there and then, you can just really relax. So it's a real good stress relief. So I'm just making another shadow tone, and I'm just going under the same technique with this far off wave here. So just spending a couple of minutes now just neatening everything up and just emphasizing bits. So as I say, sometimes you have to create a bit of a shadow just for your highlights to stand out, because if you don't have a dark background, sometimes the highlights look a bit flat. So just by providing a bit of shadow underneath the wave, what it does is it just makes that white stand out a bit. And when we neaten it up in a minute, it just makes it pop a bit more. So as you see, I keep getting up and down. What I'm doing is I'm just taking a step back a lot of time, which is edited out, and it's just to take a look at the painting, just to see where I've missed bits. So I'm just getting a really dark shadow tone now, which is just blue, purple and brown, tiny bit of white, and I'm just going to create the illusion of nearer footprints and sort of blemishes in the sand. So I'm just trying to make the illusion of sort of texture in my sand. I think the tone we used previously was just a bit too light. So all I'm doing is just trying to create sort of rivets in the sand where people have walked through it, and you have people leave these nice little marks, and it creates the sort of shadows. And again, it's just, I don't want to make it too hard, because again, it's a tutorial for beginners, but it's just to show you, just by spending an extra 5 minutes towards the end of your painting, just by adding little bits of added detail, really do just make the painting come to life and just give it that emphasis on realism. So we're just going to finish it off. We're going to get some white, we're going to tip the brush diagonally, and we're just going to have a dry brush, and we're just trying to create that sort of shimmer on the water. So where the water is peeling back, we're just going to try to create that sort of shimmer. So what I'm doing, just like how we did the palm leaves, I'm just turning it real diagonally. I'm just trying to create sort of diagonal lines. And I'm just going to get some white, and I'm going to go right up to the edge and just try to create sort of sea foam effect on that edge. Just some areas where that shine is just a bit more prominent. I think it just looks a bit flat because the sky colour is so light, so pastel. I just think it's a bit flat. So there we go, that looks nice. It's getting there. A lot of time with painting, it all comes together in the last 5-10 minutes. So let's just get some white, just really emphasize these areas. Oh, it's a bit mucky, let's just make the white look a bit nicer. It's a super easy tutorial. So same with these ones in the far distance. What I'm doing, I'm trying to have a straight line, and then I'm trying to have some that curve round. So just by tipping the brush diagonally and letting it smudge, I'm just trying to have some, oh, that's a bit too much of a smudge. Just trying to create the illusion of the waves that are just forming when they come up, and they have that little bit of a line, and they have that sort of edge that goes diagonally. So there we go. Just have it come straight off to the painting just to frame it. Just emphasize some of these ones, just where they've gone a bit murky with the underpainting. So as said previously, sometimes with the white look you just have to go over the top of it just to make it look a bit more prominent, just because it will absorb the underpainting, so that sort of turquoise it's going to absorb. So just by going over it maybe once or twice while it's dry, you can just really emphasize your sort of waves, sort of crest and its outer edges and all the foam. So look, just going over the top, just reworking where you've worked it, just makes such a difference. We want it to look bright, we want it to look all tropical. Even though we're using neutral tones, we're trying to make it look realistic. We still want it to look really pop. So I'm just going to go around this edge and again just emphasize the white now that that layer's dry. Just going to go over the top again. I'm just trying to create the illusion of sheen. Where you have the light, you get this illusion where the light sort of shimmers as the water comes up against the beach shore. So all I'm doing, I'm just trying to create some shimmer and texture. So again, I'm just the same technique as the water. I'm outlining the far edge. So if you imagine the far edge just like the water. So I'm going around the far edge. And I'm just trying to create sort of little shapes, little zigzags, just to try to create the illusion of wash and shimmer getting left behind as that wave peels back. So there we go. So really easy technique, super easy scene. I've got my signature where I want it now in the corner, where I know I'm going to have it. So everything's a nice composition, a nice frame. I think she's pretty much done. So there you go, we've got this fantastic now signed painting. You've learned how to do distance with the mountains in the far off in the horizon. You've learned how to do realistic water. You've learned how to do shadows and highlights on the water. You've got the wet sand and the wash, which is the sky color. You've got the dark sand, which is the same as the tree bark, and you know how to add texture to your tree and to the sand, and you know how to create a gorgeous palm tree. So thank you everyone for watching this great acrylic painting tutorial. Please like and subscribe. We've got plenty of tutorials now here on the channel. My name is Murray. I would like to thank you to watching, and take care guys. See you later. Bye.